So one of the things I want to just focus on for a moment, that in your theme is around finding opportunities. And I know you are also focused a lot on innovation at work. Could you talk a little bit more how in your path you've been focused on finding opportunities and maybe how that informs you today?
For me, I think finding opportunities, sometimes opportunities find you, and so you have to be able to know if it is an opportunity, I guess, and looking at things that happen as an opportunity when maybe sometimes you don't actually realize that. And so I think what I do when I work and the way I conduct myself is I do focus on relationships and building relationships with colleagues, introducing myself to people maybe that I haven't worked with before. And I think I find a lot of times the opportunities come through that networking and the relationships that you make with people. And so having an intentional positive interaction with as many people as you can will potentially pay off years down the road in a phone call or an email or a friendly contact where you run into people that you haven't talked to. And so I think for me, most of the opportunities that I've taken have been the result of a prior relationship that I formed or a contact that I made who connected me to something else. And so I do think that is an important aspect. And I think with tying that to innovation, really just making the connection between an opportunity may feel like something that's similar, but it also might be something that's completely different, and not being afraid to step into that or try something different, or maybe just again take that leap of faith into something you've never done, and then look for ways to innovate around that scenario and kind of work towards your own advantage. But also I think looking at building your own your network and your personal base as you go.
One of the things we actually talked about last week in the Mission Fuel Accelerator was about social capital and shared value, and I think you're really speaking in part to that. So along that pathway, Dr. Scholes mentioned that you took a few stops here at Cardinal Stritch University and got 3 degrees. Could you talk a little bit about the influence that Stritch had on your path and your direction?
Absolutely. So my undergraduate that I studied here, I had 3 majors and a minor. So I triple majored in accounting, information systems, and marketing, and then I minored in interpersonal communication. I didn't know that when I started, so I came in starting as a technology major, and then gradually added some of those as I took courses and found them to be interesting. And I think when I graduated with my first degree, I really felt like I had put together a very complete package of skills that allowed me to go in a variety of different directions. I wasn't sure if I would pursue accounting. I could also go into a technology field. I ended up in technology. But I always found that I draw upon the skills that I learned in all of those different aspects. The other place where it's become very valuable is my husband is self-employed and runs his own business, and so a lot of the skills that I learned in accounting and in business classes, I help apply to him running his business so he can focus on the stuff he's good at, and I can help him with all of the stuff that he'd rather not do. And so that's been, I think, a very important aspect. And I do draw it even today on things I learned in my accounting classes that I think make me a better manager because I understand them. When I went back for my first master's degree, I was working in technology, so I continued that theme and pursued the master's in computer science. But because my undergraduate was in a technology field, I wanted to personalize it a little bit, and at the time I was doing software training, and so I actually worked with the faculty here to customize that such that it wasn't all repetitive of my undergraduate programming, and was able to create essentially an independent track for adult education. So while I did take some of the computer courses that I hadn't taken here as an undergraduate, I also did a number of self-directed studies working directly with faculty on the adult education piece. Excuse me, and that was something, again, I think I use a lot. I facilitate on a regular basis, and so understanding, adult education and communication principles are very important, and while you may not think about that when you're putting your degree path together, I think that has proven to be very useful. And then I did come back for an MBA. And I think for me, the MBA probably felt the most repetitive because I had an undergraduate degree with so many credits in a business field. But what I took from that was really the group work and the cohort relationship and being able to work with teams on a variety of different projects and also bring my personal experience in business and apply that to groups of students who maybe hadn't gone through some of that or were changing fields and looking for that guidance. So I think I've drawn from each one of them in slightly different ways, and I really think I wouldn't do it any differently if I had to do it over again.
So just coming to today as to get a little more context for the group, and I know, and this might be a little hard to see, so I'm going to just go back here and ask, could you give a bit more of a sense of your day-to-day work, and what are some of the components? They're smiling over here at this table, so I guess they want to hear what you have to say.
They want to know what I do.
Not just they want to know what you do and why you do it.
Okay, well, yeah, shout out to my fan club over here. That's about half of my team. So my role, it's a kind of a funky title, so strategic planning and performance measurement, so I don't know that that's a common title in a lot of different organizations, and it really is reflective of a role that has evolved over the 13 years that I've been at Freighter. Today, our team has accountability for a variety of different functions across the organization, so probably the biggest and it's reflected in my title, is we lead the strategic planning process for our clinical enterprise, which is Freighter and the Medical College of Wisconsin. So that's a joint strategic plan that we develop with the Medical College for the clinical component of the work that we do. So all of the patient care services that we provide. We plan a long-term plan, so a 5-year strategic plan. We just actually finished our strategic plan to take us through the year 2025. We got that approved about 3 weeks ago, which was a labor of love for probably 15 months. And then out of that, on an annual basis, we prepare annual work plans. We also identify other priorities within the organization and then may work with leaders to create strategic plans for certain areas like our clinical service lines, sometimes for different departments and other areas. We also have accountability for business development and business planning, so that's helping to support some of the things like the new clinics that are being built that you've probably seen in the southeast Wisconsin area, but also relationships with other partners, some of the innovation work that we do as an organization, working with our teams internally to do that. We have a very robust team of analytics folks who look at the market, they monitor competitive behavior, they produce very comprehensive assessments of what's going on in the marketplace and how it can impact us, and that feeds directly into the strategic planning we do. We have teams of project leaders who run some of our major enterprise strategic projects, and then we measure all of our strategies. So I have a couple of individuals who really spend most of their time maintaining our scorecards and tracking our strategic goals against the progress that we're making. And then lastly, and one of the things that I think I like a lot because it keeps us connected to the patients that we serve, is our team administers all of our patient satisfaction surveys for the enterprise. And so we have the opportunity both through survey data, but also through qualitative interpersonal experiences to listen to the voices of our patients and then take all of that information and infuse it back into the other work that our teams prepare. So I think it's a very dynamic, it's never the same day in and day out, it's always a new adventure. And I think one of the things that I like the most about it is that I often get the chance to work with people across the entire organization, as opposed to being in just one vertical where you're working on one thing, kind of the same thing all the time. I get to cross the organization and I meet new people all the time. It's very fun, very rewarding.
Does that sound accurate to this
right?
to your team? Okay, good. I'm going to ask a couple more questions before I open it up. And one of the questions I always ask, we've had this speaker series for almost a few years now, and one of the questions I always ask is, how do you go about aligning your decisions, your day-to-day work with your values? How do you become aligned in your work, in your life?
So I think for me, and certainly as I've grown up, if you will, the older I get, the more connected I feel to knowing exactly what my values are. I mean, I think I've always had a strong sense of personal value, but I feel very connected and very comfortable living my values in my work day in and day out. I think for me, I approach every situation with a desire to be, genuine and honest, authentic in the relationships that I have, and to really strive to do the right thing. It sounds a little Boy Scoutish, but to make the right decision and think about the impact that decisions and behaviors have on the people around you. And I try to keep things positive. I mean, for me, I think being positive and happy and approaching things with this sense of joy really helps me see the purpose in the work that I do. And if I can always go back to that, it helps me make the right decisions, I think, for the work that I need to get done.
So I'm going to ask one more question, which I didn't mention ahead of time, of any sort to you. It's not a complicated one, but it's not about your spirit animal or your favorite color or any of those things. And I know there's a lot of folks here who are interested about innovation, so I expect there'll be questions about that. What I want to ask is another question, a favorite question of mine to ask a guest who's in a position like yourself is, you and others that you work with hire a lot of people. And as you do that, aside from a degree from Stritch, what else do you look for in a candidate?
Well, of course, the degree from Stritch is the first grade. That's like a gateway, yeah. For the role that we often hire for, and it's interesting, I had an opportunity earlier today to meet with a small group of students, and one of the things I shared with them is that it is not a traditional role that people go to school for. So they don't, go to their undergraduate degree program and say, I want to be a healthcare strategist, or I want to be a planning analyst. What the heck is that? And that's not something that you typically see on your career inventories of what you can be. And so I think one of the things that we've struggled with is how do you find, the people with the right technical competencies to come in. And while we certainly look for that, we look for people who have the technical skills that we need in terms of their ability to work in an Excel spreadsheet program or do different types of analysis. I think more and more I find that we're looking for people who have exceptional communication skills, people who have the ability to think critically, or that we believe we can develop those skills in. And we have hired a mix of fresh out of college individuals as well as those who've had longer professional careers. And I think especially for the folks that we've hired that have come right out of an undergraduate program, we're really looking for characteristics more than we are skills. And again, the communication skills, the creative thinking, that eagerness to learn, and a zest for problem solving, I think suit people very well in the roles that we typically hire for, because you don't get trained for that kind of work in a healthcare administration program, and you have to come in wanting to look for stuff on your own and ask questions and just kind of be a sponge. So I think those are skills that we look for.
So if you're okay with stretching your legs a little bit, I think we'll kind of stand up and come down here and see what questions folks have for Caryn. She's obviously the diversified skill set and background, and I tried to cover a few different areas. So if you have a question, if you could stand and project, because
that mic is now.
That's sort of our microphone fund is building, and we'll get it soon. So what questions do people have? And when you ask a question, you can just say who you are. That would be terrific. Who wants to start? Excellent. Dr. Matt Wagner happens to be an instructor for about 20 people in the room, so this doesn't work, so project, Matt.
Oh,
please.
sure. Hi, Caryn.
Hello.
Thanks for coming tonight. So my question of you is, in our class we talked about strategy and thinking about new opportunities, and thinking about your own role in Freighter. What do you look for outside of the organization that sort of informs how you might develop your strategies, your strategic work plans, or what have you? Where do you go for information?
Sure, that's a great question. So I'll talk about both the process and the tools. So from a process perspective, anytime we start a major strategic plan, we always begin with a comprehensive assessment of the environment around us. That includes the competitive landscape, the demographics, what's happening in our community. Is that we know that southeastern Wisconsin is not growing, so we see pretty stagnant population. So what's changing with the demographics? We look at what are our traditional competitors doing, but also are we seeing new competitors or different types of entrants into the marketplace that might be unusual? So in healthcare right now, you're seeing companies like Amazon and Apple taking an interest, whereas in the past you might have only been paying attention to what the other health systems were doing, right? What are the insurers doing, those types of things. And then we also do a look internal to the organization. So we have to look at our external market, but also our internal market or our internal dynamics. And that can range depending on how comprehensive of a planning process we're doing. If we're doing something like I just mentioned, our 2025 plan, we did a very extensive internal assessment where we met with stakeholders. We did a lot of information gathering within the organization, both to gather information, but also to build some of that buy-in up front and get people excited about the process. And then we typically put that together in some type of a document that we use as the foundation for the plan development. We're actually fairly fortunate in healthcare that, and in Wisconsin in particular, we actually have really good access to a lot of data. All of the hospitals in the state report their data into the Wisconsin Hospital Association, and then you can purchase access to that. So you can look at discharge volume and geographic location and all of that. It's all de-identified, but you're able to get an idea of where people are going for their care, and we have access to those tools. So we actually have a pretty robust set of market share data, which not every industry has, and that gives us a good way to assess the external market pretty quickly.
Other questions? Yeah. Ginger.
Hi, I'm Ginger from Wisconsin. I'm just interested if you have like a process that your corporation or your department uses when you're thinking about innovation. Is there like a way that you do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so. A couple of years ago, we started talking a lot more about innovation. Healthcare, like many industries right now, is seeing rising consumer expectations because of all of the digital stuff that's going on. And I mentioned some of the new entrants into the market. A couple years ago, we took, with our partner, the medical college, and created a specific joint venture that we call Inception Health. And so it's part of our organization, but we carved it out to intentionally reduce some of the bureaucracy and give it a little bit more, we'll call it nimbleness and agility in its ability to play around with innovation. And so we run a lot of our pipeline for innovation through Inception, so they can do these quick proofs of concept. They can, we try to have a very big funnel where we have lots of ideas, and then we move from ideas to a few projects we try out, and then of the ones we try out, we may only scale, one or two things into the organization, but we're constantly on the lookout for those ideas. And so that has been, I think, a very effective decision. One of the biggest challenges for us is once you've gone through all those stages and you've got something you're ready to scale, all of a sudden you send it back into the organization and it bumps up against all of the bureaucracy you tried to keep it away from to begin with. And so we're still navigating how do you take something that's gone through that quick process and then actually turn it into something that everybody adopts and implements. Last year we also hosted our first ever innovation tournament where we actually created an opportunity for all of our employees, as well as all of the employees at the medical college, to submit ideas that they thought, if implemented, could improve our patients' experience. And they ranged from little things like, put better magazines in the waiting rooms to, really large technological investments. And of that, we collected ideas for a couple of weeks, then we turned it around and we put them out and essentially did crowdsourcing to let the organization then vote on which ideas were the most likely to be effective. And then we took the top 3 ideas and we actually trained them and took them through a design thinking workshop where they got to take their idea and turn it into an actual potential project. they pitched their projects to the CEO of the organization and the dean of the medical school, and then one was selected for implementation. And so we're actively working on that. So it is kind of a neat way to engage everybody in putting those ideas together. But I do think segregating some of the innovation work does at least help get it going faster.
Caryn, I was struck by something that you said about when Mark had asked you about the question about opportunities that you see in front of you. And particularly, we have a lot of young people who are at the start of their careers or early on, and you had said something that I think is really true, that it was only in retrospect and oftentimes that you realized there was an opportunity in front of you, but that you were willing to take a risk at certain points. And I was wondering about, at this point in your career, you're still young. You still got a big future in front of you. Is there something that given the opportunity, you would have said to yourself as you were transitioning from UW-Stevens Point to Stritch? Is there a message you want to give that 18-year-old or 19-year-old that you now know would have been really wise advice? Besides, be careful when you fall in love with and marry.
Right, yeah.
Her mother's listening really carefully.
And you can't choose your parents.
And you can't choose your parents, yeah.
I wouldn't say anything.
Yeah, so, it's interesting. I mean, I think, you're right in the sense that as I find opportunities, and some of it gets back to the other question that Mark mentioned around, how do you use your values to guide decisions? And I think sometimes, if you're focusing on making the right decision and following your values and those things, then all of a sudden you realize that the decision you just made created some type of an opportunity. And I don't think I probably got that when I was 18, right? And have learned that in retrospect as you get on through your career. I think going back, I would probably tell myself or tell an 18-year-old to be open to those opportunities and not just look at it and go, well, I can't do that, or why would I do that? And you can try things, and if you don't like it, you can move on. You can try it, and who knows, you might find that you're in a niche that suits you. And I think even when I first graduated with my undergraduate degree, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be an accountant or if I wanted to go into technology. And I chose the technology route even though I had an active job offer to work as an accountant in a manufacturing firm. I decided to take a risk on technology thinking that it might go somewhere. And then I decided, later that was probably a good idea. But I still have the accounting to fall back on if, some of this other stuff doesn't work, so.
Can I just have a follow-up?
Sure.
Just a follow-up comment. Your triple major, that you created for yourself, that today higher ed is attempting to do that everywhere to try to create this interdisciplinarity, realizing that really creates a unique skill set. We're really prophetic in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think to me, like I said before, I would go back and do it exactly the same again. I think at the time I probably had no idea that it was going to work. I just like putting pieces together, and once I decided I wanted 3 majors, I just figured out how to make it work. So for me, it was more of a challenge probably. And then in the end, it ended up really turning out to be an incredibly valuable decision. I think the other thing I would just add to that is that part of the reason that I kept adding programs is because of the relationships I made with the faculty while I was here. And so I would take a class that was maybe on my required list of courses, and then I would be, so impressed with the person who taught that class, or I would feel a connection to them personally, and I'd say, I kind of want more. But then if I took more classes, well, now I'm going to have a minor, and okay, maybe I'll take another one, or maybe I'll actually turn it into a major. And so I think that was part of why I did it, and nobody said I couldn't do it. And so I just kept working through it. It wasn't easy. I took 20 to 24 credits a semester, took 12 to 17 in the summers, and graduated in 4.5 years. But it was a ton of fun. I don't know that I'd go back and do it twice, but I would do it again over. How's that?
Other questions? One of the things you said earlier today that's really struck me is that in healthcare, you really have to think of a whole new way of doing business. that it's changing so radically and so fast that you've got to change up the whole model in a way. And we were talking here about some parallels in other fields as well, including education. Could you say a little bit more about how you're making that pivot, that transition? You talked a little bit about it, but you speak a bit more to the whole new business you're in.
Sure. I think one of the challenges I mentioned, earlier is just looking at all these new entrants. I mean, who would have thought, Amazon would one day move into healthcare, or that Apple or Google or some of these other organizations would be as actively present in healthcare as they are, and continue to plan to be very clearly. And so, we can't keep doing things the way we've been doing them in healthcare. It's going to, if we keep doing the same thing we've always been doing, we will rapidly become irrelevant as everybody else innovates around us. And so one of the things that we focused very heavily on in the development of our 2025 strategic plan this year was moving away from just kind of the same old, keep a good, balance sheet, keep a good income statement, and things will be fine, to holy cow, we really need to just fundamentally throw it out the window and start to think about how we would do this completely different going forward. And the trick is finding the balance so that, you're going to have to keep doing some of the same old stuff the same way for a while, but you have to be constantly looking for that new, transformation and how you're going to innovate and kind of reinvent yourself so that you can compete with those competitors that you never had imagined in the past, or figure out how to partner with them to help move you forward in maybe a new and different way. And that involves, risk-taking in a calculated way so that you can experiment and keep the stuff that works and throw away the stuff that doesn't. But it does challenge, I think, an organization's culture, especially in an industry like healthcare, where we're very traditional and antiquated in how we operate. The model really hasn't changed in a long time.
I'm Colleen. I work at Stritch, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Caryn for a while. And you've got an incredibly impressive career. You've done a lot of things. I would like you to address, though, there's something else that I'm pretty impressed with. How do you manage your work-life balance?
That's funny. So she's asking me that because I have a large family, so I have to tell everybody that. I have 8 children. Okay, you gasp. So I have 8 kids. They range from 6 to almost 26. So I've got 1 out of college, 2 in college, 1 in high school, 1 in middle school, and 2 in elementary school. So I can tell you I certainly relate to some parents more than others. 3 in elementary school, sorry. I forget how many I've got. And, so work-life balance is an interesting concept because when I am at work, I work hard and a lot. And then when I leave work, I spend most of my remaining waking hours running people to different activities or participating in things. I'm also engaged in the community in other ways as well. So I serve on the First Stage Board, I serve on the UPath Next Generation Leadership Council, and I'm the president of our local Fine Arts Booster Club, so I have this little side thing for the arts going on. And that motivates me as well. And so I don't know exactly what work-life balance is, but I would say I feel generally that I have work-life integration. And I, at least for where I am in my current life stage, it's okay. But there are some times when it gets a little bit intense, and others that, I can make it work. I think, part of what I mentioned earlier is having a husband who's self-employed. He has more flexibility, so I think if we both worked corporate jobs, that would be a challenge. And so, my job has allowed him to start his own business, which then in turn pays back to the family because he can do things like the laundry during the day, or he can do the grocery shopping, and then his business kind of fits in between. So that works. And then of course having parents who are in the same community is very, very helpful because they help in terms of the village that it takes, and do a lot to support the family as well. So it all just kind of works. But I enjoy my time with my kids, so even if I'm driving them to activities, I find that to be part of my life balance because I get to talk to them in the car or spend time with them, and I'm heavily invested in their success as well.
Hi, my name is Alice. I'm mom of 10 from Chamber of Commerce.
great question. I mean, I think it's something that I have to stay on top of, right? Because I think as you're busy trying to create that space for other people, sometimes you lose track of creating it for yourself. I try to read. I try to read things that maybe aren't necessarily, like corporate business books, and just challenge my brain to think about things other ways. I try to, if I'm away from my desk or have the opportunity to build that time into my day where I can just sit kind of quietly and kind of think about things. And I do actually keep a little notebook in my purse, and sometimes I have wacky ideas, and I have them at really weird times. Like this morning at 4:30, for whatever reason, I decided to wake up and have lots of ideas. So I'll just jot them down, and sometimes they actually, the notebook I have in my office says something like, my journal of bad ideas. And inside it is you just kind of write random thoughts down, but every once in a while they do, kind of come back and go, I thought about something like that a while ago, and I jotted it down, and then maybe a fleeting thought turns into something you can actually build on. I think the other thing I find is that sometimes you have those thoughts and they seem totally out of context or, not worth hanging on to, but all of a sudden, 2 years down the road you go, hey, actually I had this idea and I think it was not a bad one. The other thing I think I find is that spending time with lots of different people in lots of different industries, I think makes me feel innovative because I get exposed to different aspects of business, and I particularly enjoyed being involved with the arts because I think there's sometimes parallels, but yet there are different challenges, different problems, and watching other people solve their problems, I think sometimes inspires you to use those in different ways. So. But it is a challenge. I think you're right. Good question. Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name's Tom Kipp, and I work in career education here at Stritch. And one of the things, as you're talking about innovation, as we're preparing students, one of the biggest challenges we have is how to get them to tell their story and how to demonstrate their skills or their personality, their character. What's a creative approach you've seen that you've really appreciated that you might encourage others to think about as they look for employment?
Well, I can tell you one thing not to do that I saw the last time we went to hire somebody. I don't remember which position it was for, but there must be some, I don't know, resumetemplates.com, and I think I got 4 resumes that were all on the exact same template, and they. At the top, I've never seen this before in all my years of hiring. At the top of the resume, it said something about being a young and talented leader looking for a job, and they had no experience. So I think, thinking about what makes you a leader, and it was something like years of experience or all this, and they all looked exactly the same. So clearly they typed in their name and address and pushed a button, and out came the pre-formatted resume. And I will say that doesn't make you stand out, right? So thinking about, how do you tell your story in an authentic way, such that it's really you. You want to. Everybody tells you to sell yourself, but you also want to be reasonable with the language you put on a resume. So don't say you're an experienced professional if you've never worked outside of your college experience. But I think what I've seen is more and more focus on describing examples of how you've applied skills. We do a lot of behavioral-based interviewing where we ask people not to just say, tell me about your background or tell me how you, use Excel or whatever. It's not a functional conversation. We really ask, so give me an example of a time when you had to solve a problem and you didn't have the resources at your fingertips to do that. Well, then now you have to actually show me a real example of something that you can apply in this situation. And so especially for people who are entering the working world, trying to think about, what are some real concrete examples of skills that I have to offer if maybe I don't have the years of experience that people might be looking for. And I think, again, some of the simple things, too, just about how you present yourself, how the following up with thank you notes is still highly valuable, and handwritten is way better than an email. And so those types of things are kind of professional etiquette that goes along with that whole, package of the image that you create when you're looking for a position.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have time just for one more question. Does someone have one more question they'd like to ask?
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Rabon. I'm on the board with the African American Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also a district manager with Kohler Credit Union. So my question to you is, I know you're extremely busy at work, and oh my gosh, I know I am, but also trying to prepare, my team to be, future leaders and trying to find that balance. I'm always so busy with, managing different branches and things like that. But yet I want to prepare my team, the managers that I lead, to be my replacement, and finding the time to do that. Sometimes I feel like I'm neglecting them because I'm there to serve them and to help them, and progress their careers. How do you find time to make that happen, to grow your employees?
So that's a great question, and sometimes it's easier than others, right? So I think as the work ebbs and flows, I would say I try, though not always successfully, to make sure that I make that time. And I think, even simple things like my calendar may be stacked top to bottom, but if somebody tells my assistant that they need to talk to me about a personal issue or a career coaching kind of question, find the 5-10 minutes or whatever, just find that on the calendar and make sure that that's always a priority. And we can't always make it happen. I mean, my calendar is truly a nightmare. It's a very interesting phenomenon, but sometimes I think it has arms and legs and does its own thing. But I do think that, the important part is trying to be deliberate about it. So even if it's setting aside, some specific time, I think on our team we've tried to do things like building in cycles of semi-annual conversations where we actually ask our team members to prepare just a dialogue about their personal goals and their career journey, which is different for every person. Some people want to climb the ladder, some people want to just continue to develop their skills and do very well. And so for our team, many of whom are here today, we've built in that semi-annual process, but we really let the employee lead that, and so they come in thinking about what are their professional goals, what are the things they want to work on, and then the manager creates the time to have that conversation and put together that plan. And we do that twice a year, and it's done outside of their performance management conversations so that they